Welcome, Noisy Neighbors. I'm Kit Russell, co-founder of Noise Complaints, and I'm here with my other co-host and co-founder, Lyle. For those of you that are new to Noise Complaints and Noisy Neighbors is a podcast for creatives and entrepreneurs sharing our creative process, business strategies, inspirations, and challenges. Our guest today is Dan Runcie. Dan is the founder and author of Trapital. Trapital is a newsletter that breaks down the business side of hip-hop, where Dan discusses hip-hop strategy and assesses why and how hip-hop artists, partnerships, and companies make key decisions. So today, we're taking some time to honor the legacy of Nipsey Hussle. We want to share our condolences to his family, close friends, and his neighborhood. Nipsey was a vital leader, a true artist, an entrepreneur, an inspiring icon in hip-hop culture, the African-American community, and a motivator for anyone trying to achieve their dreams. So today, I wanted to have this group discussion and just talk about the blueprint that he left behind and his music, interviews, and businesses that he built, and what this actually means for all of us in the industry moving forward. And so, Dan, just before we go into it, I just wanted to get started with a little bit about you and your background. So why don't you just tell us your story and how you got here?
So for me, writing had been a hobby for a number of years. I actually graduated from school almost 5 years ago at this point, and had been doing a few stuff on the side, but it was at that point that I wanted to put pen to paper, start my own site on Medium and see where I could go from there. So I started there and I was writing about a fairly wide range of topics. And I just graduated from business school at the time, and I just started a new job. So in many ways, writing was a hobby that I was doing outside of my typical work. So think about it, I was in school and so much of the time was breaking down case studies where I had to go deep talking about what companies from the 80s or 90s and looking at cases about Coca-Cola. But I remember that there was this one case that came through about Beyonce that someone else had done from Harvard Business School around the same time that we graduated. And it made quite a wave within the business community. And this had stuck out to me when I started my Medium page to say, okay, there's some potential here of where good writing about hip hop and business can go. So I started to write through the Medium post several times. After doing it for a few months, I actually started to get reached out to by a few freelance publications that were like, hey, you're putting this out on Medium. You might as well come put some stuff out for us and we could pay you. So I was like, all right, sounds good. Let's do it. So I started to do more and more, and I was covering a fairly wide range. I was talking about hip hop, but I was also talking about the intersections of business and pop culture, business and sports. And I really feel like I was able to identify a little bit more of the type of things I wanted to write about. And through there, things just began to snowball. I began to write for more reputable publications. I was writing for Wired. I had pieces in Complex. And I think for like a lot of us, I started to realize that it was at this pivot point where, okay, I have some momentum here, but I also have this career that's going pretty well, pretty good as well. Which one do I want to focus on? And it was still a little bit early. I didn't need to go too deep into making a decision yet, but the more and more I started to write and I had more pieces and people reaching out to me for hip hop business related stories, the idea came. And that's when I said, you know what, I really should start and have a home where I'm the one focusing on this. I've seen other people run successful newsletters and solo publications where they're focusing on a topic, establishing credibility for themselves. And I realized that I could be that person covering hip hop business, especially when I think about the impact that hip hop currently has in our society. It's just been growing and growing every minute. And someone like me that's had the privilege of being able to work in a number of different industries and seeing how those principles work, and then combining that with the genre of music that I've been following since birth, it's been a good journey for me. And I think what I've been able to do with Trapital in the past year and the amount of people that have started to pick up on it, follow it, share it, has really validated the purpose and the goals that I had behind it.
Yeah, man, I like that a lot. And I think that's part of the reason why when my friend first sent me the newsletter and I started reading it and following the detail that you were putting into these newsletters, it was clear that you had a passion for this, that it was something that you grew up with your entire life, and you, as somebody being a part of the culture. But what I liked about it is that you gave that fresh perspective. It was something that you saw a gap and an opportunity there. that people weren't talking about. And also just it, as, you know, thank you as somebody coming from the hip hop community, like there needs to be that validation of these guys and people in hip hop as thorough entrepreneurs and really thoughtful business leaders. So, and I think that's something that you do a really good job of pulling together with these.
Oh, thank you. Because the thing is, and I'm sure you probably saw it too, you saw so many deep dives into what Elon Musk is doing, good or bad, or what Mark Zuckerberg is doing, good or bad. And so much of the stuff about Jay-Z or Diddy, two of them being the, you know, people on the biggest platforms we have in hip hop, it was so surface. Great. They're on the cash case list. Great. They're worth 800 million. But what about the good things they've done? What about the nuance of the strategies they can take? I think it's very easy to get caught up. But when you think about it, if these people are almost worth $1 billion, then the coverage around it should be just as rigorous as it is for everyone else. I see you put up the finger, $2 billion. Like, sure. No, it's real.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I'm thinking it's like they need to be taken seriously. You know, just because it's entertainment doesn't mean that they're not selling something, creating a product, or marketing it. It takes the same model and the same strategies. And that's kind of what we started ours on, you know, our business because of that as well. We saw like that people didn't have that mindset going into music. People didn't think like this. And we're going to talk quite a bit about this today with Nipsey. So what I was curious about is, you know, I think it's going to be something that's really important for our listeners as well as ourselves, is just to find out how you turned something that was a side hustle or just a passion project and actually brought it into full time. So kind of walk us through how you grew Trapital and kind of key things that you think that everyone should kind of look for when they're trying to do something like that.
I think there were two things for me. One, I knew that I needed to grow a following and establish myself with that, but I also knew that I needed to build credibility within this particular niche. So with the following, let's break down that one first. Having written several times in several years as a freelancer, if you're posting on social media, if you're posting on these platforms, building your following based on, you know, how many followers you have, how many likes or retweets you're getting, it can be a bit of a fool's errand if that's how you're trying to grow your strategy. Because if you really want to be able to build from the ground up, you need to have something that's a little bit more sustainable. These algorithms run by these social media companies will prioritize and deprioritize what you're trying to put out or what you're trying to share based on how many ad dollars you have, based on how much they think that other people will like or retweet what you have. But one thing that's secure at the end of the day is the email list. Who is actually going to be getting something in their inbox? It's something that we still check several times a day. Most of us more common than we do check social media. And I know if I send you an email kit, you're going to get it. And it's not going to be deprioritized. And knowing that you can have that type of relationship and connection was key. So me starting a publication, I needed to know that I had a concrete way to be able to grow. And just knowing how email works, you're able to see the snowball effect of people being able to share it to the people that they already have. The second piece, as I mentioned, is being able to focus on a particular niche. As I mentioned before, I had started specifically back before I was working on Trapital. I'd started writing about a wide range of subjects. But think about it. There's a lot of folks that look like me writing about a wide range of subjects on there, whether they're also doing freelance at Pitchfork or all the other publications there. But to focus on a particular area, that helped me stand out, and that helps me continue to leverage that. And I think as you're able to stand out, you can extend yourself into other areas. So I think that helped me in a way that honestly I probably didn't put as much discipline with before. And I think having that mentality made it easier for me to put the steps in line to do this full time. I knew that if I wanted to work on Trapital and put it full time, I needed to save up enough money to give myself runway to be able to make it happen. So fortunately, I was able to do that. It's one of the things when the beginning of the year came, looked at the finances and made sure that things were good. And then second, knew that I had my own business model in mind. Because I'm focusing on a niche, I knew that being a niche player, I was going to have a smaller group of people that were interested, but the people that would be interested would be more likely to be dedicated and following, what I have. So, because when I think about the media landscape right now, there really are two ends. You can be successful as a small niche player that is focused on a particular subject. And then you have a few people there that are willing to support you and pay money for that. So that's what you see with some of the more successful subscription-based newsletters or the subscription-based publications. On the other side are your BuzzFeeds, the large publications that are trying to be successful with ad revenue. And those are the ones that are putting out hundreds, some even thousands of articles per day to be able to generate that. That's why some of their articles are amazing, but some of them are just there literally to get you to click a link so you can watch an ad or see an ad. And knowing that those are the two ends and those are the best ways to be successful, anyone else that is trying to do the middle ends up getting stuck or ends up, being hurt some way, or not being hurt, but not being as successful as they could be. Knowing that Trapital was on that niche end and that I knew that there was a business model that could be successful, I figured that was the best path forward.
So, yeah, and thank you for doing that and just kind of explaining the process there. Because I think more than anything, before we even get into Nipsey, I think what's good is you are somebody that exemplifies a lot of the principles that he talks about. And everything you kind of just laid out there. So let's actually go into that. And this is a question for both you and Lyle here. Is what would you guys say is Nipsey's or was Nipsey's mission and his vision?
Yeah, I'll go first. I think a big part of it was giving back to his community, empowering his community. But I think on the personal end for his business, I think it was, he calls it creating an ecosystem. So vertical integration from top to bottom. He owned the experience that he had for his business with his fans. So every stage of their interaction with his business and brand, he controlled that. So complete ownership. And through that, he had the control and power to run things as he wanted and give back to his community as he saw fit.
Definitely. Yeah, I'd agree with all that. I think that he set himself apart in a number of ways. And I think the $100, the $1,000 mixtapes were the first things he did that created, some shock value. And this was, 6 years ago at this point when he had first started it. And I think a lot of people, tilted their head back like, the hell's this dude trying to do? This isn't going to work. This is ridiculous. But what happened? It sold out in a matter of days. And you had people like Jay-Z that had bought almost 100 copies himself. And when I think about those principles, I think it's similar to what I was saying before, right? Nipsey has never tried to position himself as a Drake. And by that, I mean, he's never tried to put himself as, I am going to be the biggest mainstream artist that is going to get 7 billion streams on Spotify. That was never his game. He is I will get 1,000 people who will buy my product for top dollar, and I will put it on exclusive. I will put it on exclusively, and in order to get them bought in, I will add the experience. So it's the things that Lyle was talking about. I could put in my store, come to Marathon. You can watch a video in the store. You can walk around. You can go get the hoodies, or you can go get the Crenshaw t-shirts. You can, hang out with me if I'm there, and everyone's cool, right? And when I think about the mindset behind that, it's similar to someone that is a niche player. Even in some of the group texts I've had this past week, a lot of my friends have been mourning and talking about, oh man, this one hurts. But we also have some friends that don't live on the West Coast like we do. And they're like, I'll be honest, I'm really not as connected with this dude's music. And I think it goes back to that niche mentality. Even though, I've been on the West Coast for a few years, I feel a little bit closer to it. I'm from the East Coast, and a lot of my friends out there just weren't as closely, didn't really know as much about him. So a lot of folks, big hit, even among hip hop fans, had to explain to each other, okay, this is what this dude did. He put out this album, he did these mixtapes, and it goes back to that niche mentality that he didn't need to have the fans in, Hartford, Connecticut, or the fans in the DMV area to validate his business model, but someone like Drake does. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. It's like what you said earlier about, are you the BuzzFeed trying to attract as many people as possible? Or are you just focused on working that niche group? And
Yeah, and I was gonna say, because he was working that niche, it allowed him to really super serve those customers around him. So I remember when he put out that first $100 mixtape from Mailbox Money, and people were going crazy. They're like, "Who pays $100 for a mixtape?" But then you found out, oh, if you bought it, he'll text you. So he got your phone number, he got your contact information. He could follow up with you periodically over time. He gave you a free show, a exclusive pop up show. Mailed you like rap notebooks. So he was able to do things that other artists couldn't do for their fan base because he was focused on a niche crowd. He could super serve them.
and that's like, can you imagine? That's customer service at the most like highest degree. You have a personal connection with him now. You spend $100 and he's hitting you up saying thank you for it. Like that's memorable right there. That's creating an experience with just a little touch, you know. And so you guys have mentioned a couple times about the $100 mixtape, and so I always think that was such a cool idea. I do remember the headlines when it first came out that he did that. People were pissed off. They were like, "Yo, why do you have the audacity to do this?" In the landscape today, what do you guys think? Do you think that that's something that is possible for people to do? Do you think somebody could easily do something like that again and sell a mixtape or album for $100 in 2019?
I do. I do. I think it would need to be gone about differently, and I don't think it would create as much shock value because Nipsey was clearly able to get everyone talking about it. But I think there's two things that the $100 mixtape does. It's the shock value in the marketing tactic itself. Like, oh, people see this, they're like, okay, fine, let me go check this out. But then there's also just the diehard nature of being able to, charge your premium fans a high dollar amount because they're willing to pay for it. One of the things that I had mentioned in the article that I wrote yesterday about Nipsey is about price discrimination. So ideally, if you're in a business, you want to maximize whatever a customer is willing to pay for product. And the thing is, the way we consume music has never really been a perfect example of that. The closest thing we have is concert tickets. If you want to go, sit right up on stage, or if you want to go sit and stand in the pit or whatever, you can pay, several $100s to be as close to, whoever, so you can touch them. Or if you want to hit the cheap seats, you can be all the way in the back. That's the closest thing you have to an actual market, because purchasing the music itself, even back 20, 30 years ago, was still $15 to buy the CD. And even now, I access, whether it's Astro World or Scorpion, the same time that, a diehard fan is that like flew out to go to these things. So think about a world where a diehard fan that really wanted to listen to like Travis Scott's Astro World, and that was exclusive for the first week, and that fan had to pay $100 in order to get that access for that first week. They would do it because that's how much of a brand he was able to build through Astro World, and then the rest of us don't get to cop until a week later. I think there's an opportunity there. Would Travis Scott necessarily do it? I used him as an example. I know he does have a large fandom, but I don't think that's necessarily his game. But I do think that there's other artists out there. The value of exclusivity is just something that I think the music industry has flirted with and still hasn't figured out yet. There was it was like 3-4 years ago when streaming exclusives were big, where everyone had their album on Apple Music for 3 or 4 weeks, but then that kind of stopped after the whole Frank Ocean thing. But I think it could come back. Nipsey's was an example of this, but I think there's still an opportunity. But yeah, I'm interested if you all think there's anyone specifically that you think would be a good fit to pull this off.
So this is a question for Lyle. So somebody like a Travis Scott, somebody like a Nipsey, how do you develop a brand that is so valuable that people are willing to do that? Like, what do you think is kind of the steps that you would take? Because you kind of talked about this in the video that you made.
Yeah, I was actually gonna mention that. So for Nipsey, I remember reading an article because I was writing a case study a few years back when we put out the monetization book. And I had a short Nipsey case study in that. And in an interview, they asked a fan, like, why would you spend $100 on a mixtape that's also on DatPiff and other services? And he was like, Nipsey's given me so much game over the years for free. Why wouldn't I pay for the album or the mixtape? And so it's all about delivering value and creating that connection with your fans. Like the fan felt Nipsey speaking to me, giving me free game all these years that is improving my life. So it's really understanding like how you fit in your fans' life, and then being able to segment your fan bases, just like how businesses understand who's buying from them, and then they can segment how they talk to them, how they serve them, and deliver product to them. Artists can do the same. Now they have data to see where their super fans are, where they should spend their time, how they should talk to their fans, what they're interested in, and develop that connection. Once you develop that connection, understand how you fit in your life, and keep giving value, you can come back with a $100 project. I mean, Nipsey, he sold an experience with it. He bundled it with other things that people don't know about unless you bought it. So it's exclusive in the fact that you don't even know what you were getting with it. You thought you were just buying the album. But artists are doing it now. They have bundles where you're buying merch and they're throwing in the album for free. Just say you're selling the album for $100, and then when they get it, they also get like an autograph or merch. And if you've delivered that value over time, you can do the $100 model, but there has to be the value beforehand and the substance in the music that people are connected with.
Yeah. I was thinking somebody like of recent. I feel like in the SoundCloud era, you have all these people that are very, I wouldn't say disposable, but like they come and go. It's like, penny stocks. It's buying quick and selling fast, right? But RP to him as well. XXXTentacion was probably somebody who had that loyal of a fan base. And the reason I bring him up as well as Nipsey is that I think the music, it kind of goes back to the music and like how you create a message within that really hits people emotionally. And if you do what Lyle says of the segmentation, but you also have something that is written so well that speaks to people in such an in-depth way that you really, really thoroughly think about it and create something that's very meaningful to people. And if it impacts people, you'll know. Like the fans will let you know. And I think you can easily start to see, we have these fans that are willing to do this, that, or whatever to support me. They're probably going to be more likely with the loyalty to actually spend that $100 just on basis of the name and just on basis because you don't even need to really bundle it like that. But everyday artists might have to figure out ways to bundle and make it worth of an experience before you get to that level. But it takes, it can take time, or it can kind of happen out of nowhere. But with Nipsey, it was clear that, he ran a marathon. He took the time to build that loyalty.
Yeah, I think what also helped was for the $100 project, there were only 1,000 of them. So there was still the exclusivity of like, if you're a super fan, this is a collector item. And then for the $1,000 mixtape that he followed up with, there were only 100 of them. So even less. So if you really wanted that collectible physical copy. So I think an artist who might do it, and I don't think you could put all your albums out and have it unlimited supply for $100, but I don't know. Maybe a J. Cole, he has a pretty rabid fan base in terms of like how people connect with his music. I'm not sure though, because of the precedent of him already doing regular priced albums is there. It's kind of what people expect. So I don't know if it would need to be a newer artist without that precedent of just selling your album at a normal amount or what. I think there's a number of factors.
Yeah. I mean, shoot, how much did that Wu-Tang album go for? And then that guy buy it for like a crazy amount of money.
Yeah, but it was that exclusivity thing. They were like, we're not gonna release it at all on any other platforms. Like, if you want to hear it, you gotta bid for it.
Yeah, RZA protected that for sure. So actually, I'll go for it.
Yeah, one quick thing on the bundle. I think that the default now is actually the opposite of what we're saying. And I think that's a trap that artists could fall into. We're here talking about bundles and how they could be leveraged to sell $100, $1,000 projects. But now everybody's bundling their products in order to increase their performance on the charts. You know what I mean? Like, because I'm pretty sure that the lowest that an album could sell is like $3.95 or $3.50 or something like that. There is a rule that the RIAA has. So they have that, but then with that, you're also getting some type of collector's item and then additionally some type of t-shirt. So these are the standard things that come, but these prices are being lowered and lowered so that artists can get the highest first week album sales. And I think it would take a management team and a lead that is like Nipsey's that is thinking, I could care less about my Billboard performance. I could care less how well my album ranks compared to everyone else's. I just care about getting the money. And the thing is, it's one of these ironic things because at the end of the day, everyone should care about the money. But some people also care about the fame and the headlines that come with my album went number one this week. My album has been number one for the past 2 weeks. And it's like, what do you care more about? The money in your pocket or everyone thinking that they know you got money in your pocket?
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of artists, they don't really, want to like admit the answer to that question.
Well, it's interesting too, because a lot of people have been talking about like Nav. Like Nav was recently complaining about the fact that when he pulls up in his Lambo truck or something like that, TMZ doesn't pull out to take pictures. And he was dead serious. He was dead serious that he was upset about that. And they're like, people were like, yo, that doesn't make sense. But I think it's exactly what you're talking about. It's the fame that people see as equity. They see that as something that is you earn and that gives you respect. But I think they also look at that as the same as, hey, if I got fame, I'm going to get money. The money's going to come. And I think that comes from the whole influencer industry right now, that if you got money, then you get this endorsement. And so sometimes people don't realize that takes work as well. And I think it kind of goes back to what Lyle was saying of having that fan segmentation, understanding. And it's something that we try to help people with, is like understanding your audience so that you can sell the audience that you have and sell it authentically rather than just like, all right, I'm famous. I know I'm known by a whole bunch of people, but it's like, who are those people? You need to know how to deal with that. But I agree. It's an interesting time to really consider those things. But that also kind of goes back to like taking time to cook things slowly versus microwaving those. And so I kind of wanted to ask you guys about the importance, and this goes to Nipsey's, whole metaphor for marathon, and about the importance to him of patience and running the marathon with slow and steady progression. Do you guys think that this is something artists should practice today, or should they focus on getting their money ASAP?
I mean, there's always need for patience. Like, I'm doing a video on currency right now. When he talks about his career, he's like, I waited my turn. Like, I was with No Limit, handing out t-shirts and stuff. And then they asked me, what can you do? And he's like, oh, I can rap. With Nipsey, it was the same. He didn't have to wait his turn per se because he was in control of his career, but he knew he needed to learn things over time, build up that credibility, build up that fan base. If you want a long career and longevity, patience is going to be key. Things don't happen right away for anyone. Like, you can go viral if you don't have the foundation and work built. Once you go viral, then what? The clock starts ticking. 2 Chainz mentioned, he's like, when's the most stressful time for an artist? After they have a hit, because then everyone's expecting the next hit. If you don't have the foundation, you're not going to be able to keep delivering, and then your career is done, and now you don't have money either.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, I think it depends on the artist, because, and I pause because it's something that's been top of mind, trying to find the best way to write about the clout chasing SoundCloud rappers. Because for some of these artists, I mean, if that is literally your game, the system has been made for you to be able to do that, right? You can come in here, you can, fuck shit up for a certain amount of time, and you can get all the likes, get all the followers, and follow the pump plan in order to do that, right? And then who cares if you're not putting out music? You've leveraged your clout to be able to be a influencer who can go to Atlantic City or Reno or whoever else and be a DJ at a club and make, $30,000 a clip and not even think about it, right? And I think a lot of people may like scoff at that and be like, that's ridiculous. That's sad. It's what the Jersey Shore people and like anyone else that was on Love and Hip Hop ends up doing now. But some people want to do that, right? But I do think that the longevity is what people are after now, right? Even if you're Drake and you are trying to be as massive as possible, he's been doing this for well over a decade now. Or if you're following the Nipsey, where you are trying to, cultivate a small fan base. I think the thing with both of them, they were both doing it for a while beforehand. I mean, Nipsey's first mixtapes were in the early 2000s, and Drake had, Comeback Season was it's like second or third mixtape, and that was in 2007. So he had a good amount of time before everyone even knew who Drake was that wasn't watching Degrassi. So I do think that longevity is probably the preferred route, but like anything, there's so many channels for people to be able to do different things that if you want to chase the cloud, if you want to just get rich quick, get what you need from hip hop and go do something else, the game has been built for you to be able to do that too.
Yeah, for sure. So piggybacking to Nipsey, Lyle kind of mentioned this earlier too, but I know, Dan, you talked about this in your article this week with Trapital about vertical integration and Nipsey's vision and how it wasn't too different from Apple. So can you just kind of describe what vertical integration is, what that means, and why that was something that Nipsey actually preached as well?
Vertical integration is when you as a business entity own each stage of the value chain. So if you think about, regardless of the business you're in, you have, just to simplify it, you have suppliers who provide the tools and the supplies that you need to make the product, that bring it to the actual manufacturers themselves who create the product. And then that is then distributed and then ultimately to the consumer. So those are all distinct stages. And in a traditional business model, those could be 4 distinct companies that do that, right? If you are the store down the street, someone gets the groceries, they bring it to the warehouse, they bring it to your store, and then you get it to the consumer. Those are mostly 4 distinct things. But in the music industry, what Nipsey specifically was doing is wanting to own multiple stages of the music industry's value chain. So if you think about it, artists themselves are the ones who produce the music. And most of the times they are the ones that would work with a record label. And depending on the deal they sign, the most common deals with record labels mean that they are the ones who then own the masters. And if you work with a publisher, they then have a hand in that too. That music is then produced as the record label. They help distribute that to the consumers. They get that. They work with the streaming platforms, or back in the day, they would work with, the retail outlets to make sure it gets to stores, that is then sold to consumers. So each of those are different players in that. But what Nipsey was trying to do specifically with the marathon stores was have everything together in one. So he created the music that he had. He owned the masters himself. So that was stage A of the vertical integration. And then he would then distribute that himself through his marathon stores. So he also owns the retail outlet that he is then selling the music through. And then that's why, the stuff that Lyle and I were talking about at the beginning, where a customer could come in, and then that is where you have to buy the music for the first week. You buy it from them. And that's what he's referring to when he says he wants to own the entire ecosystem. And that is his vertical integration. And I made the comparison to Apple because Apple has been known for doing very similar thing. It's not exactly perfect. And to be fair, it isn't exactly perfect for Nipsey either. But, from a high level perspective, Apple creates the products that it sells. So it creates the iPhone, it created the iPod and the iMacs and everything else. It created those products. It also installed the software that it had on those products. So every iteration of iOS was on that product that was then sold in the Apple retail stores themselves to consumers. So they owned each stage of that and being able to provide that to the consumer. And I think there's a few caveats with both. Like, for example, Nipsey did agree to a distribution deal with the record label to help put out Victory Lap last year. And as we all know, Apple has Best Buy and other places that are authorized resellers to be able to help, sell the product to people that may not care about going to an Apple store. And they also rely on Foxconn and other companies as well to help with the exactly and content creators too. And yeah, that's the thing I had plugged in there with the big old event that Apple had last week with Oprah and Steven Spielberg. They're trying to now get into the content game and own that. So I mentioned that I think it's important to call out because vertical integration, especially with the way Nipsey talks about it, I think a lot of people initially see it as a good thing, right? You get to own these areas. And think about it. If someone else has a business, that means that they are profiting from that if they're doing it well. So if you get to own that stage too, you can then own that. So it's an opportunity to make more money. And because it's within the same chain, you have as an opportunity to reduce your costs because you're no longer having to sell or buy from another player that initially had that. It's also an opportunity to be able to control more of what's happening, which I think Nipsey clearly wanted to do. But there's some cons to it as well. It can be very expensive. As I wrote about in the piece, owning a retail location in Los Angeles, even though, Crenshaw and Slauson is much cheaper than owning somewhere in Beverly Hills, it can still be expensive. And there's also a little bit less flexibility. Like if you're working in a traditional business where you're not vertically integrated and you don't agree with what one of the suppliers is doing, it's like, all right, fine, you can walk away. You can go find another business partner to deal with. But let's say that you own that chain and that business partner is yours. Okay, well, that's now an internal problem. And it's a little bit more difficult to be able to navigate those things. So I did talk a little bit about that, but I do think it's important for people to understand the pros and the cons as well, because if you really want to get into this, if you really want to continue the vertical integration mission, that's great. I think there's a lot of advantages, but know what you're getting yourself into because Nipsey did his homework. Everything that I'm repeating now, he could repeat even better than I could. But I think for anyone that's thinking about trying to vertically integrate the rap game and do everything that he did, make sure, that that the man put in work to get there.
Yeah. And going back to the first question, what I saw his mission as is ownership. Owning himself for owning all of his art, everything that he creates, his businesses for himself and his family, but also setting that as an example for other people. And I think that was a huge goal that he stuck out. And he was like, I'm going to continue with it and I'm not going to quit with it. And that was inspiring for me. But I do agree that you definitely have to look at that, not necessarily with a grain of salt, but to step back and be like, there's realistic steps that need to be taken before you can even consider to do that. And that actually leads to my next question for Lyle, because he talked about this in his video. And it was like Nipsey's first principle, which Nipsey actually preached himself before you even go ahead to try and build something that's virtually integrated, is actually focusing on how do you really build a core product first. So Lyle, can you talk a little bit about what that means to focus on a core product and why that's important?
Yeah, I mean, for an artist or musician, the core product is their art, or in this case, music. But I think if you look at any business, it's the main product that they sell and use to that they sell to people and gets them known with people. In most cases, like Amazon started out with books, they're no longer a bookstore. But in a lot of cases, it's that product that you're known for, and you might expand and have additional products related to that. But people are coming to you because they know you for this product. In this case, like Nipsey's was music, and he was really concerned about making quality music that would connect with his fans. So in the video, I used descriptions from when he was describing the making of Victory Lap. He was like, this is going to be the project that I put out on in partnership with a label. He had been talking about Victory Lap for a long time. He made sure, he was like, this is the album I'm going to do with a label. My fans all know this. And it needs to be my best work to date. because I'm working with a label and partnering with a label, I'll have more reach. He was less concerned about the distribution, but more about the services a label could offer him to expand that reach. And if you're going to expand your reach, you need that product to be good. So he doubled down. He went back, studied all his past work, took the knowledge, found the best stuff, and said, what can I do to repeat this feeling? What do my fans love the most about me? I'm going to put that in the music. So he really focused on that core product, and he built his fan base. Like I mentioned earlier, the fans loved the game he was giving to them, which is why they would spend $100 on a project. So he made sure, so he understood that, was able to distill it into the music and really deliver a high quality product. So for any business, like let's say Nike, let's take Nike for example. They make a ton of athletic equipment, but their core product is shoes. If all of a sudden Nike started making shoes that were ugly or started falling apart, people would eventually leave Nike. Like if your core product isn't there, if the quality's not there, you're going to lose the people who originally came to you.
All of this kind of goes back to a good thing to think about, which is having a plan. Like Dan talked about, Nipsey thought about this. He started with the music. He realized he can grow this core product, own as much as he could with that, and then, kind of figured out, okay, where can I branch out? And so, and kind of a follow-up question for Lyle too, is just like the importance of having a plan. I know that's something that, we work with artists to help them with. And I know it's something that you've talked about quite frequently, but what do you think is kind of an example of a plan that people can put in place? Like, obviously not everybody can be what Nipsey did or do exactly what he did.
Yeah. And there's no one size fits all plan for anyone. To start with, one, know what you want. Like, what's your clear goal that you want for your career? And then figure out the approach you want to take, because with any goal, there's multiple approaches that you can take. Some, it's the independent route. For example, Nipsey and Chance. Chance, his was free music. Then he was going to leverage that into tour money, merch money, his hats. He's talked about he made like $3 million off hats because the music's free. Then he did a festival and he used the free music to build goodwill and awareness. Other artists, as we all know, go the label route. So figure out what your approach is going to be, and then see what your strengths are currently, what opportunities you have, where you're weak, where you may not be able to succeed, and figure out how you can use your strengths to take advantage of opportunities. Map all that out, and then figure out how you can attack and stick to your plan. And build out some milestones, stick to your plan. I think a lot of people mess up when they either don't plan or they have a plan and then something comes up and they pivot too quickly. You can always pivot, but it should make sure your pivot still leads to that end goal you have. So yeah, to really simplify it. To really simplify it, first, know where you want to go. Two, pick an approach. Then assess what you're good at, where the opportunities lie. Create some milestones so you can attack those opportunities. And then if something new comes up or you're hitting obstacles, pivot in the direction of that goal that you set in the first place.
Yeah, that's a great breakdown of it. I mean, I think about a few of the things you said, and it just makes me think broadly that there's no wrong way to go about this, or there's no like right way necessarily either. There's so many different options that folks can choose. But with that being said, you also need to be specific about and intentional about which route you go, because you can be successful a number of ways, but you got to pick a lane and drive with that. And just because something seems shiny and you may not have incorporated that into what you're doing, think about whether it makes sense before you just do it. Like, just because something is the new wave doesn't mean it's your wave.
Yeah. I think it was like last month I saw Dame Dash, who a lot of people can easily get caught up in his delivery of things. But when you actually listen to a lot of stuff he's saying, he's another person out there that gives game like Nipsey did. And he posted something that just had me just change my whole mindset, which is like, in life, no matter what, you pick a game and you play that game. Be the best at that game and win that one. It's like you just pick that specific, like you said, pick a lane. You choose, I'm going to go this route. This is what I'm going to do. Let me research and learn how any different way I can do that, how I can do that, how I can be the best at it, and just continue to grow in that. So it's clear, like, we have all this conversation about how artists can have something that's a big grand vision and big ideas. But one thing that's really important, and a lot of people are probably thinking about this as they hear it, is like, being an artist is expensive and stressful. Cool, I can do these things and I can try to be like Nipsey, or I can try to have my own vision in my business. But do either of you have any advice for people on how they can be wise with their resources? And I want to say resources because it may not even just be money, it might be time as well. And just how can they make that work in their favor?
Yeah, I think the benefit today more than anything is there are a number of free and low cost options to at least try stuff out and test and see what type of reception you're getting. The internet is powerful in that way. Of course, it can also lead to a lot of noise, and it can be harder for your sound to get where you want to. But before you make a big purchase, the more that you can use the free opportunities you have as a trial run and not necessarily be scared, the more information you get. The more information you get, the more informed decisions you can make when you actually get to the points where you need to spend money. One of the most important things that I know people tell artists all the time, and something that I keep in mind for myself as someone that creates content, is done is better than perfect. And if you can keep that mentality in mind, it just helps you iterate faster. It helps you get to these points at a much quicker than you trying to make the, encapsulating ultimate, masterpiece of whatever it is that you're making. And I think that that's one of the things that folks can do to make that journey a little bit easier.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one. Done is better than perfect. If you're trying to get perfect, it's going to suck up way more of your resources, costs way more money to be perfect, and it takes way more time to be perfect. I've preached leveraging college markets. A lot of people forget colleges. There's students there always they all love music, so they're trying to spread the word about music, discover new music. You can earn money playing shows at colleges. And if you need help on something, like students need work experience. You can find a student to help you out with graphic design, coding, data analytics, whatever it is. Just build some relationships through colleges. They also have radio stations. You might not be leveraging that. So look for what's a low cost resource and take advantage of them near you, and then tap into the creative communities around you. Collaborate with other artists. They have resources that you might not have. They have fan bases you can leverage and spread the word faster. If you hustle and find creative ways to build your fan base, it's going to lead to more money. A lot of the things that you want to do down the road just takes patience, but if you can build that the faster you can build that foundation, and by hustling smarter, then the faster you're going to get to those things you want to do down the road.
Sure. So should artists get involved in their communities? Nipsey was very, community oriented. He lived in his community. Actually, I don't know if he lived there, but he still opened his store in the community. He started giving jobs to people. Is that something that you think artists should take leadership initiatives in doing? Or, just what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's awesome, and it's inspirational that Nipsey did this. It's something that I would love to do if I ever, attained what he's been able to attain. And I respect when artists do it, because I do think when it's done right, the way that he did it, it actually is meaningful. I think I pause sometimes because although I would love every person that has as much money as a successful mainstream artist to be doing these things, is it necessarily, wrong if they choose not to, or if they choose to do different things? Because I think so often, one of the things I actually wrote about in the piece or the story that I wrote yesterday, is slacktivism, and something that is very common with high net worth individuals. When you just throw money at the local school district because you can get some good PR and get some good headlines from that. Or when you just get a foundation, or you start a nonprofit and get get one of your buddies to go run it for you and you don't even know what's happening with it. Sure, the net benefit is better than not doing anything at all, but how much of a difference did that really make? And I think in overall, I do feel like it's probably better than doing nothing at all. But I do wish that we can probably put a finer tooth comb to those kind of efforts, because that's where Nipsey really distinguished himself. If Nipsey was kind of the gold standard of what folks were doing, then great. But like, is there some like middle ground that we can like separate between what he was doing versus what I think a lot of celebrities end up doing? And I don't know if it's like a requirement, because I do think that is tough. Like if some people just don't feel like they know the best ways to go about it, I'd rather than pause. But no, I think it would be nice, at least from a personal perspective, if you got the money and if you have the ability, like put it to good use.
Yeah, I don't think it's a requirement. I think if it's something you genuinely care about and believe in, then definitely that should be a priority for you. You're going to see it's going to come back. It's going to benefit the people around you, and it's going to benefit you. But yeah, Dan was talking about slacktivism, and there's a writer. I'll shoot you his name, but he wrote this book, Winners Take All, and he talks about like how a lot of rich people donate tons of money to solve problems they created in the first place. And he's like, it's like the wolf watching the sheep. And it's like, or another analogy he used is it's like the arsonist started the fire, then he comes to the fire department, then tells the city to hire him because he'd be the best firefighter. It's like, dude, you started the fire. And it's a lot of weight. And people take advantage of activism and giving back to the community because it takes pressure off them. It takes eyes off them. It placates people. So if you're genuine about it, I think you should definitely go for it. And I think you should try to do it at a system level if possible. But otherwise, like if you're just doing it for pure personal benefit, could potentially cause more damage than good.
Yeah. And I feel like Nipsey was starting to recognize that middle ground, because he had his co-working space that he was setting up. Like something like that probably has enough resources to help people who have the mindset that are locally in these communities to actually do that stuff. Because he can only do but so much. He can, instead of just tossing the money to it and walking away, or being involved in it 100% when he has a bunch of other stuff he has to deal with, he can build the infrastructure to help empower other people that really can solve some of these problems. And it sounds like he was just kind of at the surface level of doing those things. And so hopefully people will continue to kind of carry the baton there and keep that going. But I agree with everything you guys have been saying. I think there's definitely a middle ground that can be hit there.
Yeah, wow. What you said reminded me of when those kids were stuck in that tunnel in Thailand, and what did they said? Elon Musk was trying to rescue them, and then there was this running joke that Elon Musk wanted to put the kids back so that he could go get them himself. Do y'all remember that?
Right.
No, I didn't know if I read that. That's crazy.
I remember maybe it was on Twitter. It was going around, but it was laughing because it touched exactly on like what you're saying. It's like people want the credit for that, and it reminded me of another thing too about the taxes that wealthy folks make, or the taxes that wealthy folks should need to pay. And a lot of times, the tax rules have made it so advantageous for them not to pay taxes, but instead of paying taxes, they are donating, millions of dollars to X initiative. So it can be A, problems that they started themselves, like Lyle was saying, or B, money that they should have been, contributing to the government the same way everyone else has to pay their taxes. But they didn't do that because there's no press that comes with paying your taxes, but there's press that comes with donating X thing to the school. So it's like their way of getting the recognition for doing the same thing everyone else does.
So one last question. This guy's just two-part question. So what do you guys think is kind of the impact that Nipsey's life will have on hip hop? And also, if anybody wants to embody Nipsey's mindset, how do you think they should go about doing that?
Impact-wise, it's hard to say because everything's so fresh right now that can make the claim that it's going to spur a lot of people to take ownership of their careers and be more active in their communities and build businesses. And that's easy to say right now, but we forget things really fast nowadays too. So I think the impact, we'll have to wait and see exactly, but I hope that people do those things, go back to their communities, genuinely give back, that they do take ownership of their careers, feel empowered, and empower others. A lot of times people don't empower others because they're worried about competition. They have a scarcity mindset versus a there's enough resources for everybody mindset. So I think the hope is that people empower others, take ownership of their and take ownership of their careers so that they feel secure in empowering others.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I also think that the ownership push in hip hop right now and in music in general has picked up considerable steam and attention, that some of this stuff may happen, a bit organically. I mean, there are other rappers that are pushing ownership and at least pushing some of the same principles that Nipsey did. So I'm not as concerned about that. I think that'll be there. The community efforts and the revitalization is the one that I hope, but I'm not as certain will be able to continue to the same extent, because kind of like I was saying before, donating money or getting a rich friend to go run a nonprofit for you doesn't take your time away. Nipsey's difference was that he was putting his time and effort into meeting with folks to make this stuff happen. So if you have already made it and you have the ability to do this stuff, then great. Like, you have the flexibility. But if you're one of these artists that's trying to put out a project every 4 months, then that's time away from the studio that you would need to go put towards these revitalization efforts or these community activism type stuff. And Nipsey was just so rare to have someone like that who not only focused on this stuff, but I mean, to be blunt, someone that looked like Nipsey. It's not often that you see someone tatted up like that looks the way he does, talks the way that he does, and truly was about that life when he was younger and is now doing this for the same community. People have elements of this, but it was never that wholesome. And I mean, to be honest, I'm just not sure that we can get someone that can replicate that exactly in that same way. But I hope that, I'm proven wrong there, and hopefully, it'd be great to see others follow that same line of thinking.
Yeah, I want to add a lot of the stories coming out about Nipsey as people share their experiences with him about that they had with him is the personal touch. And as Dan mentioned, the time that he put in. And then even when we talked about earlier how he connected with the fans, he did the same with giving back. He had that personal touch to it. And that's the real difference maker, I think, is here, both in his career and in the legacy, is adding that personal touch to it, taking the time to go into the community, be an active member, give back to people, talk to people. Like, when we work with artists, we always tell them, go talk to your fans. In this case, these might not be fans, but they're people around him that he's impacting. And it was the personal FaceTime, talking to them. They could see him as a real person that really made the difference.
Yep. Well, thank you guys. This was very informative. I think this was a good discussion and a good way to honor both Nipsey's career, his legacy, and his continued influence. Dan, it was great having you on the podcast, man. I think we should definitely try to explore if there's other ways we can have you back on here, especially as you continue to write so many things that we think are really vital for people that listen to Noisy Neighbors, and also for anyone that's trying to really get into the business of hip hop as an artist or an entrepreneur. So thank you for your time, man.
No, likewise. Thanks for having me. I know when you first hit me up, I was like, yeah, let's have this conversation. And even as much as, of course, we're trying to record a podcast, we could have continued on just going in a number of different areas. So no, thanks for having me. And
yeah, for sure. And just to let the listeners know, we actually, as fans of Nipsey, we've had this scheduled before his passing, unfortunately. But we had this already scheduled to talk about Nipsey because we both have been working on case studies about Nipsey and talking about everything that he's been doing. So he's definitely been a huge example to us. So thank you guys.